Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we're going to step very uncomfortably into the world of the Civil War soldier. Close your eyes for a moment. You're not in your cosy bed. You're standing on a hard dirt road. It's too hot, and the air is thick with humidity. The wool uniform you're wearing is already scratchy and damp, and you haven't even taken a step. A weight, a crippling, impossible weight, is strapped to your back. The weight of everything you own and everything you might need to stay alive. The leather straps bite into your shoulders, and a constant ache begins to thrum just behind your shoulder blades. You adjust the straps again, even though you know it won't help. This is your life now. This is the first taste of hell, and you probably won't survive it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a volunteer. Maybe you joined up with your brother, your cousin, or the boy from the next farm over. You pictured grand parades and glorious charges, bayonets glinting in the sun. Nobody told you the glory was a myth, and the reality was a forced march. The first thing you learn is that the war isn't fought in grand, sweeping gestures. It's fought one blister at a time. The first few days you're full of youthful vigour. You sing marching songs, you joke with the man next to you, but the songs fade, replaced by the heavy rhythmic thud of thousands of feet and the ragged breathing of men pushing past their limits. You're wearing a pair of shoes, or maybe boots, that were issued by the government. They were made quickly, cheaply. They don't fit. They never fit. They chafe in all the wrong places, and within the first day you can feel the skin on your heels and toes beginning to rub raw. This constant, unending trudge is a form of torture all its own. The standard Civil War soldier was expected to march anywhere from 10 to 15 miles a day, and sometimes much more. You're carrying everything you'll need to survive on your back. Your knapsack, a rough canvas or leather sack, contains a blanket, a change of clothes, and maybe a tin cup. Your haversack, a smaller bag worn over your shoulder, holds your meagre rations. Then there's your bedroll, your canteen, your ammunition box, and of course your rifle. A heavy piece of wood and iron that feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds. All in all, you're carrying a load that can easily exceed 60 pounds. It's a ridiculous amount of weight for a man who's probably never walked more than a few miles in a day in his entire life. The straps of your knapsack feel like they are slicing through your shoulders, and with every step the weight of your gear pulls at your spine, making your back ache with a deep, persistent pain that never goes away. You try to walk in step, but it's hard. The man in front of you is a little taller, and his stride is longer. You have to take 2 or 3 steps to his one just to keep up. You're constantly adjusting, stumbling and catching yourself. The dust kicked up by the men in front of you clogs your throat and settles on your skin, mixing with the sweat to form a grimy paste. You can feel a small pebble in your ill-fitting shoe, but you can't stop to get it out. If you fall behind, you'll be left behind. The sergeants don't care about your blister, your thirst, or your exhaustion. They only care about keeping the column moving. The sheer monotony of it all is soul-crushing, one foot in front of the other, mile after mile. The scenery never changes. Just the back of the man in front of you, the road stretching out in a dusty ribbon, and the relentless sun beating down on your head. A quick historical fact you might not know. A single Union soldier's full pack, including his rifle, could weigh up to 60 pounds. To put that in perspective, that's more than a third of the weight of the average soldier, who was often a small, wiry farm boy. Historians still argue whether the Quartermaster Corps intentionally issued such heavy, ill-fitting gear to save money, or if it was simply a matter of the logistical nightmare of supplying over 2 million men with equipment. Either way, it was a living hell for the men who had to carry it. The Union's M1855 Springfield rifle, for instance, weighed a hefty 9 pounds. That's before you added a bayonet and all the ammunition you were expected to carry. You've been marching all day. The sun is starting to set and the skies are bruised purple and orange. But you're not stopping. The colonel wants to make it to the next river crossing before nightfall. The jokes you were telling this morning feel like they happened 100 years ago. Now all you have are your own dark thoughts and the constant thrum of pain in your feet and back. The silence is broken only by the sloshing of water in your canteen and the jingle of canteens and mess kits knocking against each other. Some men, in their desperation, have started to jettison their gear. You see a blanket tossed into the bushes, a haversack abandoned on the side of the road. You can't imagine doing that. You know you'll need every single one of those items, but you can feel the temptation. A momentary lightness for a future certainty of misery. You finally, mercifully come to a halt. It's so dark you can barely make out the faces of the men around you. You slump down, your back finding a blessed moment of relief from the weight, but the relief is fleeting. The straps have left deep red welts on your shoulders, and your feet are on fire. You take off your shoe, and in the faint moonlight you can see the blisters, some of which have already broken, covering your heel and toes. You're exhausted beyond anything you've ever felt. This isn't the war you imagined. This is just walking. A seemingly simple, brutal act, repeated 1,000 times, until you're nothing but a raw, aching bundle of muscle and bone. And this is just the beginning. You've made it through the night, barely. The blisters on your feet are screaming with every step this morning, but at least your stomach is growling louder. Your sergeant hands you your rations for the day. He holds out a piece of hardtack, a biscuit so dense and unyielding it feels like a piece of granite. Then he drops a chunk of salt pork into your hands, greasy and slick. This is it. This is your breakfast, your lunch, and your dinner. Welcome to the culinary delights of the Civil War. The food is a constant, grinding misery, almost as bad as the marching. The army issues you a basic ration, but the supply chain is a mess, and more often than not, you're not getting what you're supposed to get. Your daily allotment is meant to be a pound of hardtack and a quarter pound of salt pork or bacon. Sometimes, you get a little coffee, some sugar, or a smattering of dried vegetables. But those are the good days. On the bad days, you get the absolute bare minimum, and even that is often spoiled. Let's talk about the hardtack. You've heard the jokes about it being bulletproof, and you can see why. It's basically just flour, water, and a bit of salt, baked until all the moisture is gone. The intention was to make it last forever, and it pretty much did. You can try to eat it straight, but it's a good way to break a tooth. Most of the time, you have to find a rock or a heavy boot to smash it into smaller pieces. Even then, you're not out of the woods. The stuff is a magnet for weevils and other insects. You learn pretty quickly to just close your eyes and eat it anyway. The old soldier's saying is that if you close your eyes, the weevils taste just like pepper. A bit of dark humour, a small coping mechanism to deal with the fact that your main food source is a stale, bug-infested cracker. The salt pork is no better. It's usually just a hunk of meat, heavily salted to prevent it from going bad. The salt is so overwhelming it makes you constantly thirsty, and water is a precious commodity. You try to boil it to get some of the salt out, but there's rarely enough time or fuel. So you chew on the greasy, salty slab, and it feels like you're eating pure sodium. Sometimes you're lucky and you get a bit of bacon, which is a rare treat. A quirky tidbit. To make the most of what little food they had, soldiers would sometimes crumble their hardtack into a tin cup with a bit of water and a piece of salt pork, heating it over a fire to create a kind of thin, unappealing porridge they called skilly-gally. It was a desperate attempt to make a meal out of next to nothing. This lack of nutrition is doing a number on your body. You're constantly tired. Your muscles feel weak. Your skin is sallow, and you can see the same look of gaunt exhaustion on the face of every man around you. Scurvy, a disease caused by a lack of vitamin C, is a constant threat. Your gums bleed, your teeth feel loose, and old wounds that should have healed are reopening. It's an invisible enemy, but it's killing men just as surely as the bullets will. Historians still argue whether the quartermaster's failure was due to incompetence, or if it was simply a result of the sheer scale of the logistical problem. Either way, the soldiers paid the price. You've been marching for hours, your stomach a hollow pit of emptiness. You catch a glimpse of a nearby farm. You know it's wrong, but the hunger is a physical ache. You and a few other men slip away from the column. You're not looking for trouble, you're looking for food. You find a chicken coop and a small vegetable patch. The farmer comes out and starts shouting, but you're too desperate to care. You grab a couple of chickens and a handful of potatoes. You feel a pang of guilt, but it's a fleeting moment. A man's got to eat. You bring your bounty back to the camp, and the other men look at you with a mixture of envy and respect. The chickens are roasted over a fire, and for a few minutes you forget about the marching, the blisters, and the filth. It's a moment of pure, unadulterated pleasure. But those moments are rare. Most of the time, it's just the hardtack and the salt pork. The army issues coffee beans, which you have to grind yourself. You can make a bit of a brew, and the hot liquid is a small comfort on a cold night. It's one of the few things that gives you a moment of peace. You can sit by the fire, a tin cup of coffee in your hands, and pretend, just for a second, that you're not in the middle of a war. The coffee, though, can't fix the deeper problem. Your body is running on fumes, and you're getting weaker every day. You can feel your own body breaking down from the inside out. The lack of variety in the diet is mind-numbing. You dream of fresh bread, of a juicy steak, of anything other than hardtack. You fantasize about your mother's cooking, the smell of fresh-baked pies, and the taste of a real, hearty meal. When you have a moment to yourself, you might try to barter a bit of salt pork for a tin of something a new recruit brought with him from home, a jar of preserves, a bit of molasses. But those are rare luxuries, and most men guard their treasures jealously. You come across a group of men gathered around a small fire, and they've somehow managed to catch a squirrel. They're roasting it on a stick, and the smell is incredible. It's a grisly scene, but you can't look away. You'd trade your rifle for a taste. They offer you a small piece, and you accept it like it's a gift from a king. The meat is stringy and tough, but it's fresh, and it's not hardtack. It's a small, fleeting moment of genuine nourishment in a world of constant starvation. The food is a constant reminder that you're not in charge of your own destiny. You're a cog in a massive machine, and the machine doesn't care if you're hungry. It only cares if you can march and if you can fight. And you can do neither of those things very well when you're starving. The gnawing hunger is a companion, a constant presence that never leaves you. It's a form of psychological torture, a reminder of everything you've left behind and everything you've lost. The war isn't just about the fighting, it's about the slow, painful decay of your body and your spirit. And it all starts with the food, or the lack of it, the marching, the starvation. All of it is wearing you down, making you weak, and it's this weakness that makes you vulnerable to the true killer on the battlefield, disease. You're not just fighting the Confederates, you're fighting the invisible army of microbes that are silently stalking every man in camp. You've heard the whispers, seen the men who vanish from the ranks, and now you're starting to understand why. It's a cruel irony that you've survived the long march and the starvation, only to fall victim to something you can't even see. You wake up with a gnawing pain in your stomach. It's a familiar feeling. Almost everyone in the regiment has it. You try to ignore it, to blame it on the hardtack, but it's a different kind of pain, a deeper, more insistent cramping. Soon enough, you're making frequent, desperate trips to the latrine trench. Your stomach feels like it's being tied in knots, and the dysentery is relentless. It's not just an inconvenience, it's a slow drain on your body. Every trip to the latrine saps your strength, dehydrates you, and leaves you feeling hollowed out. You see other men struggling with it too, their faces pale and their eyes sunken. The latrines themselves are just open trenches, dug too close to the camp's water source, which you're still drinking from. The filth from the latrines seeps into the ground, contaminating the well, and the cycle continues. Dysentery is just one of the many plagues that are running rampant through the army. There's typhoid fever, a slow burn that leaves you with a raging fever, and a feeling of complete exhaustion. There's measles and mumps, which seem like childhood diseases but are deadly to grown men who were never exposed to them as children. Pneumonia is a constant threat, especially with the nights getting colder. The list goes on and on. You learn the names of the diseases as quickly as you learn the names of your comrades, and you learn that the diseases are far more dangerous. A Union soldier was 3 times more likely to die from disease than from enemy fire. Historians still argue whether the lack of sanitary knowledge was due to a widespread societal ignorance of germ theory, or if the sheer scale of the conflict made proper sanitation impossible. Either way, the results were devastating. You lie in your tent shivering under a single blanket even though it's a warm day. The fever is making you lightheaded, and every muscle aches. You can hear the sounds of the camp outside, the laughter, the drill commands, the rhythm of a bugle call. But it all feels a million miles away. A comrade brings you a tin cup of water, and it's the most precious thing in the world. You're so thirsty, but your stomach can't keep anything down. Your body is fighting a war on 2 fronts, and the internal battle is a losing one. The camp itself is a breeding ground for sickness. You're living in close quarters with thousands of other men, many of them sick. There are no proper medical facilities. A field hospital is just a collection of tents, often overwhelmed with men suffering from a variety of ailments. The doctors, if you can even call them that, are often just young men with a few years of medical school under their belt. with no understanding of what causes disease. They prescribe whatever they have on hand, often a concoction of laudanum or a mix of herbs that do little to help and sometimes make things worse. You see the doctor in charge walking through the rows of sick men, his face a grim mask of exhaustion. There's so little he can do. You're just a number, another body to add to the grim tally. A quirky fact. One of the most common treatments for a variety of ailments was a pill made of a mercury-based compound called calomel. Doctors believed it would cleanse the body of disease, but in reality it often caused severe salivation, bleeding gums, and even tooth loss. It's a small detail, but it speaks to the general ignorance of medicine at the time. You'd probably rather take your chances with the disease than the cure. The constant rain makes everything worse. The camp becomes a muddy swamp, and you're forced to live in a world of muck and standing water. The clothes you're wearing are almost always damp. Your boots, which were already a nightmare, are now caked in a thick, wet mud that never seems to dry. The air is heavy with the smell of unwashed bodies, stale food, and human waste. It's a sensory assault that makes you feel sick just being there. You try to find a dry spot to sit down, to get a moment of respite, but there's nowhere to go. You're surrounded by the very things that are making you sick. You see a man from your company, a big strong fellow who was joking just yesterday, now lying still in his bedroll. His face is ashen, and his breathing is shallow and ragged. You know what it means. You've seen it before. The sickness takes the strongest men just as easily as it takes the weak. It doesn't care if you're a hero or a coward. It's just a grim, unrelenting force, and there's no way to fight it. You just have to hope that it doesn't come for you. You're a long way from home. You're a long way from your family. You can't imagine them knowing what you're going through. The letters you write home are filled with cheerful lies. You tell them you're healthy and well, that the food is good, and that you're having a grand adventure. You don't tell them about the sickness, the hunger, the filth. You don't want to worry them, and a part of you doesn't want to admit to yourself how bad it is. You hold on to the last shreds of your dignity, the last sliver of the man you were before you joined up. But the sickness is chipping away at it, one miserable day at a time. It's a slow death, but it's a death all the same. The fighting is still to come, but the war has already claimed a part of you, and it won't be long before it claims the rest. You're a veteran of the march now, a survivor of the hardtack and the dysentery, but you can't escape the final constant enemy, the filth. It's a physical presence, a miasma that hangs in the air, a layer of grime that you can't scrub away. The war has made you a creature of the earth, and the earth is a cesspool. You don't just endure the filth, you become a part of it. You've been in this camp for weeks now, and it's a monument to the unsanitary. The ground is a thick, soupy mix of mud, rain, and human waste. There's no system for waste disposal. Men relieve themselves wherever they can find a bit of privacy, which isn't much. The latrine trenches, if they're even used, are shallow and overflowing, a breeding ground for flies that buzz around everything. Your food, your face, the open sores on your skin. The air is heavy with the smell of unwashed bodies, stale sweat, and rot. You've long since given up on the idea of a proper bath. A quick splash from your canteen is all you get, and you're wearing the same clothes you were issued months ago. They're stiff with sweat and grime, and you can feel the itch of fleas and lice that have taken up residence in the seams. The simple act of drinking water is a constant gamble. The nearest stream is also the latrine, the washing basin, and the garbage disposal for thousands of men and horses. You know it's polluted, but you have no other choice. You fill your canteen and hope for the best, a tiny prayer in the back of your mind that this sip won't be the one that sends you to the hospital. A historical fact: over 80% of diseases in the Civil War were a result of unsanitary conditions and poor camp hygiene. It wasn't the heroic charges that were killing men. It was the mundane, the routine, the simple fact that they were living in their own waste. The camp kitchen is another source of misery. It's just a fire pit with a few large pots, and the cooks, who are just soldiers assigned to the job, do their best, but it's a hopeless cause. The food is cooked in the open, and flies swarm the meat and the bread. The pots are rarely, if ever, properly cleaned. It's a miracle you haven't all died from food poisoning. You see a rat scurry across the ground and disappear into a pile of refuse, and you feel a strange sense of kinship with the creature. You're both living in the same garbage dump. You can't escape it. When you lie down to sleep, the ground is damp and cold, and you can feel the mud seeping through your thin blanket. When you wake up, your uniform is coated in a thin layer of grit, and your skin feels perpetually dirty. You try to clean your rifle to keep your equipment in good order, but the dust and the mud get into everything. The constant cleaning feels like a pointless exercise in a world that is fundamentally and irrevocably dirty. A quirky tidbit. Some soldiers, out of sheer desperation, would try to boil their clothes to kill the lice and fleas. It was a common sight to see a man holding his uniform over a fire, steam rising from the wet wool. The bugs might be killed, but the clothes would shrink and become even more stiff and uncomfortable. It was a trade-off, less itching for more chafing. A simple, grim choice in a world of simple, grim choices. You look around at the other men, and you see the same weariness, the same film of grime on their faces. You've become a mirror of each other, all of you moulded by the same brutal, unsanitary conditions. There are no heroes here, just a collection of dirty, tired men. You've lost your sense of self, your connection to the life you lived before. Your uniform is no longer a symbol of anything. It's just a canvas for the dirt and the grime of war. The lack of sanitation is a topic that historians still argue about. Was it a lack of understanding of germ theory, or was it a logistical impossibility? In an age before modern plumbing and waste management, how could an army of over 100,000 men be kept clean? The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, a grim mix of ignorance and a lack of resources. The result, however, was a slow, painful death for thousands of men. The battlefield was a place of dramatic, violent death. The camp was a place of quiet, lingering death. And the quiet deaths were far more common. You see a man struggling to wash his face with a small trickle of water from his canteen. The water runs down his face, picking up the dirt, and he looks like he's crying mud. It's a miserable, pathetic sight, but you can't help but feel a flicker of sympathy. You know what he's trying to do. He's trying to hold on to the last shred of his humanity. But the war is a great leveller, and it's erasing all the distinctions, all the pleasantries, all the small comforts of a civilized life. The filth is a physical representation of the war's psychological toll. It's a constant reminder that you're not a man anymore. You're an animal living in a pen at the mercy of forces you can't control. You're just a body, a vessel for a rifle and a uniform, and your only purpose is to endure. The dirt gets under your fingernails, into the creases of your skin, and into the cracks in your soul. It's a permanent stain, a mark that will never come off, even if you survive the war. The dirt is part of you now, and you are part of the dirt. The dysentery, the constant hunger, the gnawing filth, all of it has a purpose, a terrible purpose. It's softening you up for the moment when a bullet or a shell finally finds its mark. And when that happens, you'll discover that the hell of the battlefield is nothing compared to the hell of the field hospital. It is here, in a tent reeking of blood and ether, that you come face to face with the grim reality of Civil War medicine. You're not in a hospital in the modern sense. You're in a clearing behind the lines, a collection of tents set up in a hurry. The ground is hard, uneven. You lie on a cot made of rough canvas, and the pain in your leg is a living, breathing thing. You were hit during the last skirmish. A mini ball ripped through your calf. It wasn't a clean shot. The bullet hit the bone, and the leg below the knee is a mangled mess. The pain is so intense you can barely think. You try to clench your teeth, to hold back the cries, but they escape anyway, a long guttural moan that blends in with the moans of 100 other men. The doctor is a young man with a tired, grim face. He has a bottle of whiskey, a few dirty rags, and a saw. He looks at your leg and sighs. He doesn't offer you any words of comfort, no reassurances. There is no time for that. He just says, "Looks like it's come to this, son." He takes a long swig of the whiskey and hands you the bottle. You drink from it greedily, the burn a brief distraction from the white-hot agony in your leg. It's all the anaesthesia you're going to get. This is a cold, stark reality you've probably heard about, but to experience it is a nightmare. Amputation was the most common form of surgery during the Civil War, a historical fact. Over 60,000 amputations were performed during the war, mostly due to the devastating effects of the Minié ball, a cone-shaped bullet that flattened on impact and created massive, irreversible damage to bone and tissue. The doctor takes out his saw. It's a long, wicked-looking thing, and you can see a smear of blood on it from the last man. You want to protest, to beg him to stop, but the words are stuck in your throat. He holds your leg in place with his left hand, and you can feel his grip firm and unyielding. The pain in your leg is already unbearable, but it's about to get worse. You feel the blade touch your skin, and then a searing, tearing pain as it begins to cut through the flesh, the muscle, the gristle. It's a slow, agonizing process. You try to scream, but only a hoarse gasp escapes your lips. You can feel the vibration of the saw through the bone, a deep, sickening thrum that feels like it's vibrating your entire body. It's a surreal, horrifying experience, one that your mind can't quite process. This is something that happens in stories, in nightmares, not to you. But it's happening. You pass out mercifully, and you come to an unknown amount of time later. Your leg is gone. There's a bloody stump where it used to be, wrapped in a dirty rag. The pain is a dull ache now, a constant reminder of what you've lost. The air is thick with the smell of blood and a peculiar sweet smell, the smell of infection. You see a man next to you, his face pale and his breathing shallow. He has a wound in his arm and it's oozing a thick yellowish fluid. You know what it is. Gangrene. Without a proper understanding of germs, infection was rampant. A quirky tidbit. Doctors would often wipe their surgical tools on their aprons to clean them, spreading bacteria from one patient to the next. The apron was a badge of honour, a sign of a busy surgeon, but it was also a grim reminder that his hands, his tools and his clothes were a delivery system for disease. The field hospital is a scene of organised chaos. There are men moaning, men screaming, men who have fallen silent. The doctors and orderlies move with a grim efficiency, but they are overwhelmed. There are far too many men and far too few resources. You're just a number, another body to be dealt with. There's no time for individual care. The doctor who operated on you is already moving on to the next man. The silence that follows the amputation is a strange kind of comfort, a hollow space where the pain used to be. You're still in shock, your body numb with a mixture of pain and exhaustion. You just lie there, staring at the canvas roof of the tent, and you can't believe what has happened to you. Historians still argue whether the Civil War advanced or hindered the medical profession. On the one hand, the sheer number of wounded men provided a grim opportunity for doctors to practice new surgical techniques. On the other, the lack of sanitary knowledge and the primitive nature of the tools meant that thousands of men died needlessly from infection and surgical shock. You, however, don't care about the historical debate. All you care about is the dull ache in your phantom limb, the feeling that your leg is still there, still throbbing with pain, even though you know it's gone. It's a cruel joke your mind is playing on you. You'll never walk the same way again. You'll be a cripple, a one-legged man. And even if you survive this, you'll be marked for life. You've lost a part of yourself, not in a heroic charge, not in a blaze of glory, but on a canvas cot in a dirty tent with a saw and a swig of whiskey. You feel a profound sense of loss, a gnawing sadness. You think of your family, of your life before. You think of running through a field, of climbing a tree, of dancing with a girl at a country fair. Those things are gone now. They are a part of a life you no longer have access to. The war has taken more than your leg. It has taken your future, and there's nothing you can do about it. The doctor leaves, and you are alone again, in a world of pain and misery, a world that has been irrevocably changed by a single, small piece of lead. You've survived the long march, the wretched food, the diseases, the filth, and the brutal medical procedures. Now, you must face the reason for it all, the fighting itself. You stand in a line, shoulder to shoulder, and a terrible cold dread fills your stomach. You look down at your weapon, the rifle in your hands. It's a M1861 Springfield, a musket that feels like a heavy piece of dead wood. It's what you'll use to kill, and what will likely be used to kill you. And the primitive nature of these weapons makes every battle a brutal, terrifying dance with death. The Civil War was an odd mix of old and new. The tactics were Napoleonic, men standing in straight lines, firing in volleys. But the technology had changed. The old smoothbore muskets had been replaced for the most part by rifled muskets that fired the new and devastating mini-ball. The problem was that the new technology was still in its infancy. Your rifle is a single-shot muzzle-loading firearm. That means to fire it, you have to stand up, pour a measured amount of black powder down the barrel, ram a mini-ball down on top of it, and then, with a cap on the nipple, you can finally fire it. It's a tedious, time-consuming process. The time it takes to reload is an eternity. You could, if you were an expert, get off 3 shots in a minute. 3 shots. To put that in perspective, a modern soldier can fire hundreds of rounds in that same time. This slow rate of fire is what made the battles so deadly. The men in the opposing line are moving slowly towards you, and you can see their faces, a grim parade of young men just like you. The distance is closing, and you can feel your heart pounding in your chest. The officers are yelling orders, their voices roar from shouting. Ready! Aim! Fire! A wave of black smoke erupts from your line, and you can feel the kick of the rifle against your shoulder. The report is a deafening roar, and the smell of sulphurous black powder fills the air. You try to see what's happening, but the smoke is so thick it's like a solid wall. You can hear the screams of the men who have fallen, and the air is filled with the terrifying whine of mini balls flying past your head. A historical fact, the mini ball, despite its devastating effect, was a terribly inaccurate weapon. At 100 yards, a marksman could hit a man-sized target about half the time. At 300 yards, it was almost impossible. It wasn't a weapon of precision, it was a weapon of mass chaos. You're trying to reload. You tear a paper cartridge with your teeth, dump the powder, jam the ball down the barrel with your ramrod. You're fumbling with the tiny percussion cap. Your hands are shaking and the fear is a cold, clammy presence that has wrapped itself around your heart. You can hear the men in the other line firing their own volleys, and the sound is a thunderous, terrifying rumble. A man next to you suddenly goes limp, a neat little hole in the middle of his forehead. He's dead before he hits the ground. It's a surreal, impersonal death. You were standing shoulder to shoulder and now he's just gone. The slow pace of the reload means that every shot you fire feels like it's your last. There are no follow-up shots. You get one chance to aim, one chance to fire, and then you're a defenseless target. You have a bayonet, a long steel spike that attaches to the end of your rifle. It's the last resort, the grim promise of a close-quarters, desperate fight. You can see the bayonets of the men in the other line glinting in the faint light that filters through the smoke. The sight of them is enough to send a shiver down your spine, a quirky tidbit. Despite their terrifying reputation, bayonets were rarely used to kill. The very sight of them was usually enough to make the opposing side retreat. The threat of a bayonet charge was often more effective than the charge itself. The noise is unbearable. The sound of thousands of rifles firing at once is a continuous, deafening roar. Your ears are ringing, and you can barely hear the man next to you shouting. The smoke, the noise, the fear. It all combines into a sensory overload that makes it impossible to think, to reason, to do anything but follow the simple, ingrained commands. You're a machine, a part of a larger, terrible machine, and your only purpose is to continue the grim cycle of load, aim, fire. Historians still argue whether the Civil War was a truly modern war. It had the mass armies and the devastating technology of a modern conflict, but it was fought with the tactics and the training of a bygone era. You are a part of that grim transition. You have a weapon that can kill with devastating efficiency at a distance, but you're forced to use it in a way that maximizes your own risk. The battle is a testament to the stubbornness of the old way, a bloody anachronism played out on a field of blood and bone. You fire another shot. You have no idea if you hit anything, the smoke is too thick. You're reloading again, your hands moving on autopilot, your mind a blank slate of pure terror. You can hear a man yelling for a medic, but you know there's no help coming. You can see the flashes of light from the rifles of the other line, a grim, silent Morse code of death. You feel a strange sense of detachment, a feeling that this is all a dream, a terrible, unbelievable dream. But the smell of the gunpowder, the taste of the hardtack in your mouth, the constant ache in your feet, it all reminds you that this is very, very real. And the truth is, you'd rather be back on that endless march, with its blisters and its hunger, because at least on the march you weren't a single vulnerable target, a body waiting for a primitive piece of metal to rip through your flesh. You've stood your ground through the terrifying volleys, reloading on instinct, but you still can't see anything. The battlefield is not the clean, heroic tableau you imagined from the pictures in the newspapers. It's a sensory assault, a suffocating, confusing chaos that strips you of your senses and your sanity. The first thing you realise is the smoke. The black powder used in the rifles creates a thick, acrid smoke that hangs low in the air, a rolling, impenetrable fog. Within minutes of the first volley, you can no longer see the enemy line, you can't see the man next to you. You can only see the faint outline of a uniform, a pale face, a grim set of shoulders. The smoke is so thick it feels like a physical thing, a blanket of death and confusion that envelops you. It stings your eyes and clogs your throat, making it difficult to breathe. You're firing blind, aiming at the general direction of the sound, hoping that your shot will find its mark. And the sound. Oh, the sound! The reports of thousands of rifles firing at once are a continuous deafening roar, a sound so loud it feels like it's vibrating your very bones. The air is filled with a horrible whining sound, the sound of mini balls flying through the air, a high-pitched metallic buzz that feels like 1,000 angry hornets. The shouts of the officers are lost in the din, and all you can hear is the frantic guttural noise of the men around you, the screams of the wounded, and the sickening thud of a body hitting the ground. A historical fact. The sound of a Civil War battle was so immense and so constant that it could be heard for miles. People in Washington, D.C. could hear the cannon fire from the Battle of Gettysburg, over 80 miles away. It wasn't a quick fight. It was an hours-long assault on the ears, the mind, and the soul. You're a part of a line, but the line has no cohesion. The smoke and the noise have made it impossible to communicate. You're standing next to a man reloading your rifle, and then, a moment later, he's gone. You don't know what happened to him. You don't know if he was shot or if he just ran. You have no way of knowing. You're an island in a sea of chaos, and your only job is to keep firing. The fear is a constant companion. It's not a rational fear, a fear that can be reasoned with. It's a primal, animal terror that makes your heart pound in your chest and your hands shake. You're waiting for that moment, for that tiny buzzing sound to stop, for that single moment of pain, and then for it all to be over. You look around, and you can see the same look on the faces of the men around you, a mask of grim, pale terror. There's no heroism here. There's just a desperate animal instinct to survive. The battle is a study in confusion. You don't know where the enemy is. You don't know where your own lines are. You can't see the flags, can't hear the bugles. You're just a part of a larger, meaningless melee. Orders are shouted, but you can't hear them. You see a man run forward and you follow him. You don't know why you're running, or where you're running to. You're just a part of a herd, a mass of humanity moving forward in a direction that you hope is the right one. A quirky tidbit. The smoke was so thick that a soldier could get lost just a few yards from his own line. Soldiers would get disoriented, walk into the enemy line and be captured or killed, all without ever knowing where they were. The chaos of battle is a mental and physical ordeal. Your uniform, already soaked with sweat and grime, is now coated in a thin layer of black powder residue. You feel a constant deep ringing in your ears that won't go away. The smell of sulphur and cordite is a metallic, sickly sweet smell that gets into your clothes, your skin, your hair. You will never forget that smell. It will be the smell of death for you for the rest of your life. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of these large-scale, close-quarters battles. Was it a triumph of discipline over technology? Or was it just a pointless, bloody mess that cost thousands of lives for no real gain? You don't have the answer. You're just a part of the grim calculus, a body in a line of bodies, a piece of a larger, incomprehensible machine of death. You're a pawn in a game you don't understand, and the only thing you know for sure is that you're losing. You come across a man, his face a pale, grim mask of pain. He's clutching his stomach, and you can see the blood seeping through his uniform. He looks at you, his eyes wide with fear, and he says something, but you can't hear him. You just look at him, a silent moment of shared misery, and then you move on. There's no time to stop. There's no time to help. You're just a man in a line, and the line is moving forward, a grim procession of men marching toward an unseen enemy. And you can't help but think that this is what hell must be like. A place of endless, pointless noise and confusion. A place where you can't see the face of the man next to you. A place where you're all alone in a crowd of thousands, and a place where every step you take is a step closer to a silent, meaningless death. And the scariest thing of all, it's not over. It's never over. The battle will end, but the memories will stay. A silent, grim procession of all the things you saw and felt and heard. The confusion, the noise, the black smoke. It will all be a part of you now, a part of the living hell you're enduring. You've survived the deafening, blinding chaos of battle, but the elements are a more subtle, constant torment. The war doesn't stop for the weather, and you are always at its mercy. You're not fighting just the enemy. You're fighting the sun, the rain, the bitter cold, and the endless mud. This is a new layer of hell, a slow grinding misery that wears you down day by day. You're a Union soldier, and you're in the South. The heat is a physical presence, a thick, suffocating blanket of humidity and sun. Your wool uniform, designed for colder climates, is a portable oven. It's too hot to wear, but you have no other choice. It soaks up the sweat, becomes heavy and scratchy and never seems to dry. The straps of your pack chafe against your skin, and the salt from your sweat forms a crystalline film that stings your open sores. The sun beats down on your head, and you can feel the heat radiating through the cheap kepi cap you're wearing. The air is still, heavy, and the only movement is the buzzing of flies. You're constantly thirsty. Your canteen a grim reminder of how little water you have. You learn to ration it, to take small sips, to feel the brief, blessed relief of a cool liquid on your tongue. But the relief is fleeting. You're always on the verge of dehydration, your mouth a dry, papery wasteland. The heat is more than just an inconvenience. It's a killer. Men collapse from heat stroke, their bodies shutting down under the relentless assault of the sun. The march becomes a desperate crawl, a slow procession of exhausted men stumbling forward. You see a man fall, his face pale and his breathing shallow. The sergeant just looks at him and says, "Keep moving, boys." You can't help him. You can't stop. The column is moving and you have to move with it. A historical fact, thousands of soldiers on both sides succumbed to heat stroke during the hot summer campaigns. The sun was a more effective killer than many of the battlefield charges. It was a silent, invisible enemy that you couldn't fight with a bayonet or a rifle. And then comes the rain. The sky opens up and a deluge falls, turning the dirt roads into a soupy, impassable mess. The march becomes a nightmare of slipping and sliding, your boots caked in a thick, sucking mud that makes every step a Herculean effort. Your uniform, which was a sauna in the sun, is now a cold, wet prison. It clings to your skin, the wool heavy and smelling of wet dog. You're shivering, even in the warm rain. There's no way to get dry. The fire you try to make won't light. The tent you're huddling in leaks. You're a sponge, a waterlogged, miserable creature, and you can feel the dampness seeping into your very bones. You find a moment of morbid humour in the fact that the rain at least cleanses you of some of the dirt, but you're trading one misery for another. The cold is an even worse beast. As winter approaches, the rain turns to sleet and then snow. The nights become a brutal, biting cold that seeps into your bones and won't let go. Your single blanket is no protection. You huddle with the men around you sharing body heat, but it's a losing battle. The wind howls through the camp, a freezing lament that makes you feel a profound sense of loneliness. Your feet, constantly wet from the mud, are now a frozen, numb mess. Frostbite is a constant threat. You see men with black, dead toes, a grim reminder of what the cold can do. You'd trade everything you own for a warm fire, a dry blanket, a roof over your head. But there is none. A quirky tidbit. To combat the cold, soldiers would often take off their socks and put them under their shirts to keep them warm and dry with their body heat. They'd then reapply them to their freezing feet. It was a small act of desperation, a last-ditch effort to keep a part of themselves from freezing solid. It's the kind of small, pathetic detail that really tells you what a living hell this was. Historians still argue about the role of the elements in the outcome of the war. Were the cold winters a contributing factor to the Confederate defeat? Did the diseases that came with the filthy wet camps weaken the men to the point of ineffectiveness? You don't have an answer. You're just a man in a blanket, shivering, trying to hold on to a shred of warmth, a shred of hope. You're a pawn in a game of weather and war, a small, insignificant piece of a larger, brutal chess match. The weather is a constant, unyielding opponent. You can't shoot it, can't bayonet it, can't outrun it. You can only endure it, and it will wear you down, a little bit at a time, until there's nothing left of you. The sun, the rain, the cold, they are as much a part of this living hell as the bullets and the hunger, and you can't escape them. You're trying to sleep, but you're too cold, too wet, too miserable. You think of your home, of your bed, of a warm fire. You think of the little things, the things you took for granted, a warm cup of coffee, a dry pair of socks, the simple, blessed luxury of a roof over your head. The war has stripped all that away. It has reduced you to your barest, most primal form, a shivering, hungry animal, whose only goal is to survive the next moment. And in this moment, in this freezing, miserable darkness, you have to admit to yourself that you may not. The cold is a relentless, unyielding enemy, and you can feel it slowly, surely, taking a piece of you, a piece of your warmth, a piece of your soul, until there's nothing left. You've survived the brutal weather and the deafening chaos of the open field, but now the war has settled down. You're not marching, and you're not fighting a grand battle. You're living in a hole in the ground. The trenches were meant to be a place of safety, a refuge from the constant threat of a minia ball, but you quickly learn that they are a special claustrophobic kind of hell all their own. Your trench is a rough, shallow ditch, barely deep enough to stand up in. The walls are made of dirt and sometimes reinforced with wooden planks or logs, but they're constantly collapsing. You're always digging, always bailing out water, always trying to keep the earth from swallowing you whole. The trench is narrow, barely wide enough for one man to walk through, and you're constantly brushing against the men around you. A grim, continuous procession of bodies. You're in a living coffin, a long winding grave that you share with thousands of other men. A historical fact. The Civil War was one of the first conflicts to see widespread use of trench warfare. A grim precursor to the horrors of World War I generals still preferred open-field battles. But the soldiers, with their instinct for self-preservation, began to dig in, creating a stalemate that would define later conflicts. The smell is the first thing that hits you. The trench is a stew of 1,000 terrible things: stale sweat, unwashed bodies, human waste, and the lingering metallic smell of death. You're living in a world of rot and decay, and the smell is a constant companion, a heavy, sickly sweet miasma that you can't escape. The flies and the rats are your only company. The rats are big and bold, and they feast on the garbage and the bodies that are too close to the surface. You've gotten used to seeing them, but you haven't gotten used to the scuttling sound they make in the darkness. There's no privacy. You're always surrounded by people, but you're always alone. You eat, sleep, and relieve yourself in the same cramped space. You can hear the sounds of the men around you, the snoring, the coughing, the quiet sobbing of a man who has finally broken. It's a collective misery, a shared purgatory, and there's nowhere to hide. You can't escape the war, not even in your dreams. The constant gnawing presence of the enemy is just a few hundred yards away, a silent, unseen threat that is always there. You can't leave, can't go forward, can't go backward. You're trapped. The nights are the worst. You're on constant alert. You can hear the sounds of the enemy, the muffled conversations, the scrape of a shovel, the sudden, terrifying crack of a sniper's rifle. You're always waiting, always listening. The sleep you do get is shallow and filled with nightmares. You wake up with a jolt, your hand on your rifle, your heart pounding in your chest. A quirky tidbit. To pass the time, soldiers would write letters, carve small objects out of wood or bone, or play cards. The card games were a way to forget, for a few brief moments, that you were in a hole in the ground, waiting to die. The small acts of humanity, of normalcy, were a way to hold on to the last shreds of your sanity. The boredom is a kind of torture all its own. There's nothing to do but wait. You watch the sun rise and set, a slow, tedious procession. You stare at the opposite trench, a distant, menacing shadow, and you try to imagine the men who are there, the men you will have to kill. You wonder if they're just like you, scared, hungry, and wishing they were home. You feel a strange kind of kinship with them. You're both living in the same hell. Historians still argue whether the trench warfare of the Civil War was a logical adaptation to the new technology of the mini-ball or a tragic failure of command. The generals, trained in the old ways of open-field battles, didn't know how to deal with the stalemate that the trenches created. The result was a series of pointless, bloody assaults on fortified positions, costing thousands of lives for no real gain. You're a victim of that grim equation. You're a body in a ditch, waiting for an order that you know will be a death sentence. The rain comes, and the trench turns into a muddy, soupy mess. You're standing in cold, grimy water up to your ankles, and there's nowhere to sit, nowhere to lie down. Your boots are caked in mud, and you can feel the constant dull ache of cold, wet feet. The walls of the trench begin to crumble, and you have to fight the mud, fight the rain, fight the feeling of claustrophobia that is slowly, surely closing in on you. You're an animal in a cage, a grim, wet, miserable creature whose only hope is that this will end one way or another. The feeling of being trapped is the worst part. You can see the open field, the promise of freedom, but you can't go there. You're stuck in this hole, a small, insignificant piece of a larger, terrible machine. You think of home, of the open spaces of the fields you used to run in. The memory is so vivid it hurts. You feel a deep, gnawing sadness, a feeling of regret. You've traded your freedom for this, a life of filth, of hunger, of boredom, of fear, and you can't get it back. The trench is your home now, your prison and your grave. You've made it this far, through the trenches, the weather and the endless marching. You've become a grim, hardened veteran. You've seen men get shot and you've learned to just keep going, to not look back. But you always knew, in the back of your mind, that one day it might be you. And now, in a sudden, violent eruption of noise and pain, it is. Getting shot in the Civil War was not the clean, cinematic experience you might imagine. It was a messy, brutal, and often fatal affair. The order comes to go over the top. You clamber out of the trench, your heart pounding in your chest. You're running forward, a part of a wave of humanity, and the air is filled with the sound of 1,000 angry hornets, the sound of mini balls flying past your head. You're a target, a moving, vulnerable piece of meat. You can't see the men who are shooting at you, but you can see the flashes of light from their rifles, a grim, silent Morse code of death. You're a part of a grim calculus, a body in a line of bodies, a number to be added to the tally of the dead. You feel a strange sense of detachment, a feeling that this can't be real. And then it happens. A single, sharp, excruciating pain in your arm. It feels like a sledgehammer, a physical, visceral blow that sends you spinning. You fall to the ground, the impact of the mini ball a searing, white-hot agony that radiates through your entire body. The pain is not a dull ache. It's a living, breathing thing. You can feel the bullet. A small piece of lead, lodged deep in your flesh. You look down at your arm, and you can see the blood, a dark, pulsing river, pouring out of a hole in your uniform. A historical fact. The Minié ball, a cone-shaped bullet with a hollow base, was designed to expand upon firing, creating a spin that increased accuracy. But when it hit a body, it flattened and tumbled, creating a massive, devastating wound that shattered bone and tore through tissue. It was a perfect weapon for creating a mess, and it did. You're on the ground, and the battle is still raging around you. The sound is a deafening roar, and the smoke is a thick, acrid cloud that chokes you. You're no longer a part of the fight. You're just a casualty, a body on the ground. You try to get up, to crawl, but the pain is too much. You lie there, a small, insignificant piece of a larger, terrible machine. You can hear the screams of the wounded, the cries for help, the final gurgling breaths of a man dying nearby. You're a part of a grim, terrible tapestry of suffering, a small thread in a larger, incomprehensible pattern of pain and death. The waiting is the worst part. You're on the ground, bleeding, and you have no idea if a medic will come for you. You have no idea if a stray bullet will find you, if a man will trip over you, if you will just bleed out slowly, surely, in the mud. The sun is beating down on you and you're starting to feel cold. You're in shock, and your mind is a blank slate of pure, unadulterated terror. You think of your family, of your life before. You wonder if they will ever know what happened to you. You wonder if they will get the grim news that you're just a number, a statistic, a name on a list. A quirky tidbit. To save their lives, some men would play dead, lying still on the battlefield until the fighting was over. It was a desperate, dangerous gamble. You were hoping the enemy would pass you by, that you wouldn't be trampled by a horse or a man. It was a last resort, a small, pathetic act of defiance against a grim and terrible fate. You didn't do it because you were a coward. You did it because you were a man who wanted to live. The pain is a constant, gnawing presence. You try to move your arm, but a fresh wave of agony makes you cry out. You're just lying there, waiting for the end. You have no control over anything. You can't fight, can't run, can't hide. You're just a body, a vessel for pain and suffering. Historians still argue whether the Civil War was the bloodiest war in American history due to the outdated tactics or the new, devastating technology. You don't care about the academic debate. You only care about the pain, the blood, and the feeling of a cold, clammy dread that has taken root in your soul. You're a victim of both. The old tactics put you in a place of great vulnerability, and the new technology made sure that your wound was a devastating, irreversible thing. You hear the shouts of the men around you, the bugle call to retreat. The sound is a beautiful thing. The fighting is ending and you have a chance to live. But the chance is slim. You can feel the blood seeping out of you, a warm, wet puddle on the ground. You close your eyes and you try to imagine your home, your family, your life before. The images are distant, fuzzy, like a dream. The only thing that is real is the pain, the mud, and the sound of your own ragged breathing. You're alive, but you're not sure if it's a good thing. The war has a way of leaving you with nothing but a body full of pain and a soul full of scars. And the worst part is, you know that even if you survive this, you'll still have to face another hell, the grim, desolate and often fatal journey to a field hospital. You've survived the wound, the terrible journey to the field hospital, and the grim reality of Civil War medicine. You are alive, but your hell is not over. It has just changed forms. You're not on the march anymore, and you're not in the trenches. You're in a prison camp, and you'll soon learn that the worst of all possible fates wasn't death or a crippling wound, but the slow, grinding misery of being a prisoner of war. You arrive at the camp, a place so desolate and grim it looks like it was scraped from the earth itself. It's surrounded by a high wooden fence, a wall of tall, unforgiving logs. You're a nameless face in a sea of nameless faces. You're herded in with thousands of other men, a silent, grim procession of the defeated. The guards, in their grey uniforms, are little more than spectres. They watch you with a detached, bored indifference. You are no longer an enemy soldier. You're just a prisoner, a number, a body that has to be fed and housed, a burden they wish they didn't have to bear. The camp is a wasteland. There's no grass, no trees, just a flat expanse of dirt and human misery. There are a few ramshackle huts and tents, but most men live in the open, under the brutal sun or the freezing rain. There is no sanitation. The latrine is a long, overflowing trench, and the smell is a constant, suffocating presence. You're sleeping in your own filth, and there's nowhere to go to get clean. The lack of hygiene, the constant close quarters, and the lack of food and water make the camps a breeding ground for every disease you've heard of and a few you haven't. A historical fact, over 56,000 men died in Civil War prison camps, with a mortality rate that was often higher than on the battlefield. Andersonville, the most infamous of the camps, was a grim testament to the utter failure of the prison system. The food is a joke. You get a daily ration if you're lucky. It's often just a cup of coarse cornmeal, a few ounces of bacon, and maybe a little salt. The cornmeal is sometimes mouldy, and the bacon is rancid. You're constantly, miserably hungry. You dream of food, and your dreams are a cruel, mocking fantasy of all the things you can't have. You see men eating rats, or anything they can catch. You see them fighting over a single crust of bread. The desperation is a palpable thing, a grim, silent presence that hangs in the air. You're constantly thirsty. The water is a brown, muddy liquid that you can feel is full of disease. You can't drink it, but you have no other choice. It's a cruel game you play with yourself, a mental exercise in a world of physical pain. You know it's bad for you, but you're so thirsty you have to take a chance. A quirky tidbit. Some of the men, in a desperate attempt to stave off scurvy, would take the bark from the few trees that were in the camp and boil it, believing it had medicinal properties. It was a grim, pathetic act, a last-ditch effort to keep a part of themselves from rotting away from the inside out. It was a testament to the fact that you were just a body, a collection of organs that was slowly, surely failing. The boredom is a kind of torture all its own. There's nothing to do but wait. You watch the sun rise and set, a slow, tedious procession. You can hear the sounds of the men around you, the coughing, the moaning, the quiet sobbing. You see men lying on the ground, their faces pale and their eyes sunken, and you know they're not going to make it. You feel a strange sense of detachment. You've seen so much death and suffering that it has lost its meaning. You're a ghost in a land of ghosts, and you're just waiting for the day when you'll join them. Historians still argue whether the horrific conditions in the prison camps were a result of intentional malice, or a simple, tragic consequence of the collapsing infrastructure of the South. You don't care about the debate. You only care about the constant gnawing hunger, the constant debilitating thirst, and the feeling that you are slowly, surely, dying, not from a wound or a disease, but from the simple, brutal act of waiting. You're a prisoner, and your only hope is that this will end one way or another. The feeling of being forgotten is the worst part. You're 1,000 miles from home, 1,000 miles from your family, and you have no way of letting them know you're alive. You write letters, but you know they'll never be sent. You're a ghost, and the world has forgotten you. You're just a name on a list, a small, insignificant piece of a larger, terrible machine of war. You have no purpose, no future, no hope. You're just waiting for the end. And the end is a long time coming. You're lying on the ground, shivering even though the sun is beating down on you. You can feel your body breaking down from the inside out. Your bones feel brittle, and your skin is sallow. You can feel your own mortality, a cold, clammy presence that has wrapped itself around your soul. You think of your home, of the warmth, of the food, of the simple, blessed luxury of a soft bed. The memory is so vivid it hurts. It's a cruel, mocking fantasy, a reminder of everything you've lost, and you know, with a profound and terrible certainty, that you will never get it back. The prison camp has taken more than your freedom. It has taken your hope. You've survived the physical horrors, the marching, the hunger, the wounds, the filth, the prison camp. But the war is also a war on your mind, a constant gnawing assault on your spirit. You've been reduced to a primitive state, a body that exists only to endure. The grim reality is that your mind is often the first thing to go. Morale is a constant, quiet struggle, a battle you fight every day, and one you are slowly but surely losing. The initial enthusiasm that led you to enlist has long since evaporated. The patriotic speeches and the romanticised notion of glory are a distant, mocking memory. You're no longer fighting for a cause, you're just fighting to survive. The daily grind is a soul-crushing monotony of boredom, fear and misery. You're always waiting. Waiting for the next order, waiting for the next meal, waiting for the end of a battle, waiting to die. This endless waiting is a form of psychological torture, a slow grinding dread that permeates every waking moment. You see men who have given up. They just sit there staring into space, their eyes empty. They are still breathing, still alive, but they are gone. This grim reality is one of the darkest aspects of the war. The homesickness is a constant gnawing pain. You think of your family, of your life before. You think of your mother's cooking, the sound of your father's laughter, the soft touch of your sister's hand. The memories are so vivid and so real that they feel like a part of you, a part that has been ripped away. You get letters sometimes. They are a precious, fragile link to a world you no longer belong to. You read them over and over again, the familiar words a brief, beautiful respite from the endless misery. But the letters are also a cruel reminder of what you've lost. They tell you about a life that is still going on without you, a life that you may never get back to. You write back, but you can't tell them the truth. You can't tell them about the hunger, the sickness, the filth, the constant gnawing fear. You write cheerful lies, and the lies are a part of the grim reality. You're protecting them from the hell you're in, but you're also building a wall between yourself and them. A historical fact. Desertion rates were incredibly high on both sides of the conflict. Over 200,000 Union soldiers and over 100,000 Confederate soldiers deserted. These men weren't cowards. They were just men who had been pushed past their breaking point. They had seen too much, endured too much, and the thought of returning home, of seeing their families again, was too strong to resist. The war was a moral and a psychological battle, and for many men, it was a battle they chose to lose. The bonds of camaraderie, the friendships you formed with the men around you, are a saving grace, a small flicker of humanity in the darkness. You're all in this together. You share your meagre rations, you tell jokes to lighten the mood, you help a man who's too sick to walk. These small acts of kindness are a lifeline, a way to hold on to the last shreds of your humanity. But these bonds are also a source of great pain. You get close to a man, you share a meal with him, you share a laugh, and then, a moment later, he's gone. A sniper's bullet, a stray piece of shrapnel, a bout of dysentery. He's just a body, a small piece of a larger, incomprehensible tragedy. The death of a comrade is not just a loss, it's a constant, terrible reminder that you're next. A quirky tidbit. Some soldiers would get drunk off of homemade liquor, a foul-smelling concoction made from fermented potatoes or anything else they could get their hands on. It was a brief escape, a few hours of blessed oblivion, a way to forget for a little while the constant gnawing dread. The constant threat of death is a psychological burden that is impossible to ignore. Every step you take, every meal you eat, every time you lie down to sleep, you are aware that it could be your last. You learn to live in the moment, to not think about the future, to not think about the past. You learn to be a grim, silent observer of your own life, a man who is just a few inches, a few seconds, away from a total and irreversible end. This fear is a corrosive acid that eats away at your soul. It takes away your ability to feel joy, to feel hope, to feel anything but a grim, weary resignation. Historians still argue about the mental and psychological toll of the war. Did the constant exposure to violence and death lead to a form of post-traumatic stress disorder? Or was it just a normal reaction to an abnormal situation? You don't care about the clinical diagnosis. You only care about the constant gnawing feeling that you're not the same person you were before. You're a stranger to yourself, a man who is a collection of memories of hunger, filth and death. And you know, with a profound and terrible certainty, that even if you survive this, you will never be the same again. You're a walking ghost, a man whose soul has been hollowed out, a man who has seen too much and felt too little. And the war, the hell, is still not over. You've been surrounded by thousands of men for months, maybe years, and yet you've never felt more alone. The constant presence of others, the collective misery and the shared fear can't fill the hollow space in your soul. The pervasive loneliness of war is a silent, creeping horror, a mental isolation that separates you from every man around you and from the person you once were. You're an island, a solitary figure in a sea of grim, weary faces. The sheer anonymity of it all is a part of the problem. You know the faces, the names, the stories of the men in your company, but beyond that, everyone is just a uniform. You're a part of a nameless, faceless mass, a small piece of a larger machine. There's no individuality, no personality. You're just a number, and you feel it deep in your bones. You lose your sense of self, your connection to the unique person you were before you enlisted. You become a shadow, a ghost, and you're haunted by the memory of the person you used to be. The war has a way of erasing all the things that made you, you. You can't talk about it. You can't talk about the terror, the guilt, the shame, the constant gnawing fear. The men around you are fighting their own battles, their own demons, and there's a silent agreement not to talk about the things that are too horrible to mention. You share a look with a man who has just seen something terrible, a moment of shared, unspoken horror, and then you both look away. The silence is a wall, a barrier that separates you from everyone around you. You are all in this hell together, but you are all in it alone. It's a cruel irony that in the midst of thousands, you can feel a profound, bottomless isolation. The letters from home, a cherished link to the world you once knew, are a double-edged sword. They are a brief, beautiful connection, but they also serve as a grim reminder of how far you've fallen. They speak of a life of normalcy, of a world where people worry about crops and weather and a new dress. You can't talk to them about the reality of your life. How do you explain the smell of death, the taste of hardtack, the feeling of a minier ball ripping through flesh? You can't. You write cheerful lies, and the lies are a part of the wall you've built between yourself and them. A quirky tidbit. To cope with the isolation, some soldiers would create elaborate fantasy lives in their letters home, describing imaginary girlfriends or heroic deeds that never happened. It was a way to maintain a connection to a world they no longer belonged to, a way to hold on to a shred of the person they used to be. The constant state of flux and uncertainty also contributes to the loneliness. You're always on the move, always a temporary fixture in a temporary camp. You don't have a home, a base, a place of rest. You're a nomad, a wanderer in a landscape of desolation and war. You can't put down roots, can't form lasting connections. The war has a way of uprooting everything, of leaving you with nothing but the clothes on your back and the grim, empty feeling in your heart. Historians still debate the psychological effects of the Civil War on its veterans. Was it a simple case of what we now call PTSD, or was it a unique form of soldier's heart, a term used at the time to describe the physical and psychological toll of prolonged stress and fear? You don't know the name of what you have, but you know it's a profound, unshakable emptiness. You're a ghost, a man who is living, but who is not alive. The war has taken your joy, your hope, your ability to feel anything but a grim, weary resignation. Even in the most intimate moments, the loneliness persists. You're huddled with the men around you for warmth, but you are still a world away. You can feel the closeness of their bodies, but you can feel the distance of their souls. You are all in this together, but you are all in it alone. The fear is a personal thing, a private agony, and no one can share it with you. You have to fight your own demons, and you have to do it alone. The war is a relentless, brutal campaign against your mind, and the loneliness is its most effective weapon. It takes away your sense of self, your connection to others, and your ability to feel anything but a profound, bottomless emptiness. You watch the stars at night, a small, beautiful reminder of the world you once knew. But the stars don't feel like a part of your world anymore. They feel distant, cold, and a million miles away. You feel a profound and terrible sense of loss, a gnawing sadness that you will never get back the person you were before. You're a grim, empty husk, a man who has been hollowed out by the war, and you know, with a profound and terrible certainty, that even if you survive this, you will never be the same again. The loneliness is a part of you now, a permanent scar that will never fade. The war has taken your body, your hope, and your soul, and all you have left is a profound, unshakable isolation. And the hell is still not over. You've endured the marches, the battles, the trenches, and the profound loneliness, but you're still not fighting. You're waiting. The war is not a continuous action-packed saga. It's a long, tedious, and soul-crushing period of nothing. This endless, agonizing waiting is a form of torture all its own, a silent psychological war that wears you down day by day. You're in camp. The sun is a bright, indifferent eye in the sky. The dust is a constant presence, a fine film on your skin, your uniform, your every possession. There's no marching, no fighting. There's just the monotony of existence. You sit in your tent or outside and you stare. You stare at the other men, you stare at the dust, you stare at the sky. There's nothing to do, nothing to occupy your mind. Your rifle is clean, your equipment is in order. You've written all the letters you can write, and you've read all the letters you've received 100 times over. The boredom is a physical presence, a heavy, suffocating blanket that smothers all hope and all joy. The officers try to keep you busy. There's drill, a pointless, repetitive series of commands and movements that you've done 1,000 times before. You march in circles, you practice reloading your rifle, you learn to form a line. It's all a grim pantomime, a way to pass the time. But the drill doesn't fill the hole in your soul. It's just a brief, unfulfilling distraction from the long, agonizing march of time. A historical fact. In a typical Civil War campaign, soldiers spent less than 10% of their time in combat. The other 90% was spent marching, training, and most of all waiting. The war was not a series of battles. It was a series of long, boring, and miserable periods of waiting, punctuated by moments of extreme, brutal violence. You pass the time with the other men. You tell jokes, you play cards, you trade stories. You try to remember a time before this, a time when a day was not defined by its lack of meaning. You remember your life at home, the rhythm of the seasons, the routine of a normal life. The memory is a cruel, mocking fantasy. It's a reminder of a world that you no longer belong to, a world that is going on without you. You feel a profound sense of loneliness, a feeling that you are a ghost, a man whose life has been put on hold, a man who is just waiting for it to begin again. The waiting is made worse by the constant gnawing anxiety. You know that at any moment a bugle call could sound. At any moment the order could come to pack up, to march, to go to battle. The waiting is filled with a terrible silent tension. You're always on edge, always listening. You try to relax, to find a moment of peace, but it's impossible. Your body's always tense, always ready. You're a coiled spring, a man who is always waiting for the moment when the spring will be released. And you know that when it is, it will likely be a moment of terrible, gut-wrenching pain and death. A quirky tidbit. To combat the boredom, soldiers would sometimes write in journals a grim daily accounting of their misery. These journals were often filled with the most mundane of details. The weather, the food, the rumours that were flying around camp. It was a way to create a record of your life, a way to prove to yourself that you were still alive, still a person, even in a world that was trying to make you a ghost. It was a small act of defiance, a way to hold on to the last shred of your humanity. The war has a way of taking everything from you, and the waiting is a part of that grim process. It takes away your time, your sense of purpose, your ability to feel joy. It leaves you with nothing but an empty, hollow feeling, a profound sense of wasted time. You're a man who is living in a state of suspended animation, a man who is just waiting for the end. The war is not just about the fighting, it's about the slow, silent decay of your spirit. Historians still argue whether the long periods of waiting contributed to the psychological toll of the war. Was the boredom a welcome relief from the terror of battle, or was it a form of psychological torture all its own? You don't have the answer. You only have the memory of the endless days, the long silent nights, and the constant gnawing dread. You're a man who is a collection of memories of waiting, a man who is a ghost in a land of ghosts. The waiting has taken your joy, your hope, and your purpose, and the end is still a long way off. You're watching the sunset, a fiery, beautiful end to a long, empty day. The sky is a bruised purple and orange. You feel a profound and terrible sense of loss, a gnawing sadness that you will never get back the time you've lost. The war has taken your youth, your innocence, and your future, and all you have left is a grim, weary resignation, a profound and terrible emptiness. The waiting is your hell, and it's a hell that you will never escape. You've survived the boredom of the endless waiting, the mental decay of a life on hold. But there's another physical grinding misery that you can't escape, one that's with you every minute of every day, your uniform. It's not a symbol of glory or a badge of honour, it's a second skin, a rough, uncomfortable prison that chafes, itches and restricts your every move. It's a constant physical reminder of the hell you're living in. You're wearing a uniform made of rough, coarse wool. It's heavy, scratchy, and it feels like it's a size too small no matter what. The wool is a sauna in the summer, and it offers little protection against the biting cold of winter once it gets wet. You're constantly sweating, and the wool soaks it up, becoming stiff and heavy. The salt from your sweat forms a fine, white film on the fabric, and it stings your skin, particularly in the places where the seams rub against your armpits and thighs. The uniform never seems to dry, and you're constantly wearing a damp, miserable suit of clothes that smells of sweat and mildew. The equipment is no better. The straps of your knapsack, made of rough leather, are constantly digging into your shoulders. The friction creates a raw, bleeding wound that never seems to heal. The weight of your gear, your rifle, your ammunition box, your haversack, your canteen, is a constant physical burden that you can't escape. The leather belts and straps are stiff and unforgiving, and they rub against your hips and waist, creating a constant dull ache. You're in a perpetual state of discomfort, and there's nothing you can do about it. A historical fact: the Union's M1858 haversack, a canvas bag for carrying rations, was often poorly made and uncomfortable, leading many soldiers to discard them and use their knapsacks for food instead. It was a small act of defiance, a way to make your life a little more bearable, but it was also a grim reminder that your gear was not designed for your comfort. It was designed for the efficiency of the army. The shoes are a special kind of misery. They were mass-produced and often didn't come in different sizes, so you just got a pair and hoped for the best. They were made of stiff, unyielding leather, and they were a torture device from the moment you put them on. The ill-fitting shoes created blisters that never healed, and the constant walking turned your feet into a raw, bleeding mess. You can feel a small pebble in your shoe, but you can't stop to take it out. If you did, you'd fall behind, and you know what that means. You're a walking, bleeding testament to the inefficiency and the lack of care of the Quartermaster Corps. A quirky tidbit: to combat the constant itching and chafing from their wool uniforms, some soldiers would take a piece of salt pork and rub it on their skin. The grease would provide a brief, greasy relief, but it also made the uniform smell, and it attracted flies. It was a small, pathetic act, a way to find a moment of comfort in a world of constant misery. It was a testament to the fact that you were a man who was willing to do anything for a moment of peace. The lack of proper hygiene makes everything worse. Your uniform is a breeding ground for lice and fleas. You can feel them crawling on you at all times. They get into the seams of your uniform, into the creases of your skin, and into your hair. You can never get rid of them. You try to pick them off, to crush them, but it's a futile exercise. They're a constant crawling reminder that you are a filthy, miserable creature, a man who has lost all sense of self. Historians still argue whether the ill-fitting and poorly made uniforms were a result of the rapid mobilization of the war, or if it was just a testament to the fact that the men were not seen as individuals. The truth is probably a grim mix of both. The men were just bodies, a part of a larger, terrible machine, and their comfort was not a priority. The result was a grim, physical, day-to-day hell that was just as bad, in its own way, as the terror of battle. The uniform is a symbol of everything you've lost. It's a symbol of your freedom, your dignity, your identity. You're no longer the man you were before. You're just a man in a blue or grey uniform, a nameless, faceless part of a larger, meaningless conflict. The uniform has taken yourself, your individuality, and your humanity. It's a prison, a cage, a physical manifestation of the war's psychological and physical toll. You're sitting in the rain, shivering, and the damp uniform feels like a cold, wet blanket. It's a physical weight, a physical burden that you can't escape. You can feel the constant dull ache of your body, the constant itch of your skin, and the constant gnawing misery of your soul. The uniform is a part of you now, a permanent scar, a mark that will never come off. And you know, with a profound and terrible certainty, that even if you survive this, the memory of the uniform, the smell, the itch, the chafing, will be with you forever. It's a part of the living hell you've endured, a grim and constant reminder of the physical and psychological toll of war. You've endured the physical and mental prisons of war, but there is one fear that hangs over you at all times, a silent, creeping dread that is just as bad as the sound of an oncoming volley. The fear of capture. Being a prisoner of war in the Civil War was a fate worse than death for many, and you know it. It's a constant gnawing anxiety that is a part of your daily life, a fear that you can't escape, even in your dreams. You're on a scouting mission, a small detachment of men moving through the woods. The silence is a physical thing, a heavy, oppressive presence that makes your heart pound in your chest. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of a leaf makes you jump. You're not afraid of a bullet. A bullet is quick, a moment of pain, and then it's over. You're afraid of being captured. You've heard the stories, the grim rumours that fly around camp like flies. You've heard about Andersonville and Libby Prison, about the starvation, the disease, the slow, agonizing decay. You've heard that they'll take your clothes, your shoes, your dignity, and leave you with nothing. The fear of that fate is a cold, clammy presence that has wrapped itself around your soul. You're a part of a grim calculus. You're a pawn in a game you don't understand, and if you get caught, you'll be a small, insignificant piece of a larger, terrible machine of death. You'll be a bargaining chip, a body to be traded for a body, a small piece of a larger, meaningless equation. Your life will have no value, no meaning, no purpose. You'll just be a number, a statistic, a name on a list. And that is a grim, terrible reality that you can't escape. A historical fact, the parole and exchange system, which allowed for the trading of prisoners of war, broke down in 1863. The breakdown of this system meant that a captured soldier was no longer guaranteed to be sent home. He was now facing the very real possibility of a long, slow and miserable death in a prison camp. This was a grim turning point in the psychological toll of the war. The fear of capture makes you do things you wouldn't normally do. You're more cautious, more paranoid. You're constantly looking over your shoulder, constantly listening. You learn to move silently, to not make a sound. You're an animal, a creature of the woods, a man whose only goal is to survive. You think of the men you've seen who were captured. You remember their faces, their eyes wide with terror, their bodies trembling. You remember the look on their faces, a look of profound, bottomless despair. You know, with a profound and terrible certainty, that you don't want that to be you. You'd rather take a bullet. You'd rather take a bayonet. You'd rather die a quick, honourable death than face the slow, agonising and humiliating decay of a prison camp. A quirky tidbit. To avoid capture, some soldiers would carry a small piece of paper with a list of their name, rank and company. The hope was that if they were killed, their body could be identified and sent home to their family. But if they were captured, they could destroy the paper and pretend to be someone else, a nameless, faceless soldier who had no value to the enemy. It was a small, pathetic act of defiance, a way to hold on to the last shred of your dignity. It was a testament to the fact that the fear of capture was so great that men were willing to become ghosts, to become nothing, just to avoid it. The fear of capture is a psychological burden that is impossible to ignore. It's a constant nagging presence that takes away your ability to feel joy, to feel hope, to feel anything but a grim, weary resignation. You're a man who is living in a state of constant low-level panic. You can't sleep, can't eat, can't relax. You're always on edge, always listening, always waiting for the moment when the world will fall apart and you will be a part of the grim, terrible machinery of the prison system. Historians still argue about the morality of the prison camps. Were they a result of a collapsing infrastructure, or were they a deliberate act of cruelty? You don't care about the academic debate. You only care about the fear, the constant gnawing dread, and the profound, terrible emptiness in your soul. You're a man who is a collection of memories of fear, a man who is a ghost in a land of ghosts. The fear of capture has taken your joy, your hope, and your purpose. And the end is still a long way off. You're lying in the mud, shivering, and you can hear the sound of voices, a muffled conversation. You don't know if it's your men or the enemy. You hold your breath, your body tense, your hand on your rifle. You're a man who is living in a state of suspended animation, a man who's just waiting for the moment when the world will fall apart. You feel a profound and terrible sense of loss, a gnawing sadness that you will never get back the peace of mind you've lost. The war has taken your youth, your innocence, and your future, and all you have left is a grim, weary resignation, a profound and terrible emptiness. The fear of capture is your hell, and it's a hell that you will never escape. You've made it through the long march, the brutal battles, the endless waiting, and the constant fear of capture. Your initial enlistment, a 3-year contract, is coming to an end. You've seen things that no man should ever see, felt things that no man should ever feel. You're a different person now, a grim, hardened ghost of the man you once were. You have a choice. You can go home, a crippled, scarred veteran, or you can re-enlist. And for some grim, terrible reason, many men chose the latter. This choice, a perverse act of loyalty or madness, was a special kind of hell all its own. You're standing in a line of men, and a sergeant is yelling, a constant abrasive presence. He's telling you about the benefits of re-enlisting. He's telling you about the bounty, a sum of money that you can use to help your family. He's telling you about the camaraderie, the bond you have with the men around you. He's telling you about the honour, the glory, the grim, terrible necessity of finishing the job. He's telling you all the lies you heard when you first enlisted, and for some reason, they sound convincing. They sound like a better alternative to going home a cripple, a man who can no longer work the farm, a man who has nothing to show for his time but a ruined body and a hollowed-out soul. You look around at the men around you, and you see the same weary resignation, the same hollowed-out eyes. You've all been through the same hell, and you've all been changed by it. You're no longer farm boys and factory workers. You are soldiers. You have a purpose, a role, a grim, terrible part to play in this great bloody drama. The thought of going home is a terrifying one. What would you do? How would you explain what you've seen? How would you live a normal life, a life of peace and quiet after all this? You're a man who has been trained to kill, a man who has been trained to endure, and the thought of going back to a life of quiet desperation is more terrifying than the thought of another battle. A historical fact: while many soldiers chose not to re-enlist, a significant number did. In 1863 and 1864, as their initial terms of service were expiring, tens of thousands of Union soldiers re-enlisted, often for a significant bounty and a 30-day furlough home. This act of veteranization was a major boost to the Union Army, but it was also a grim testament to the fact that some men couldn't, or wouldn't, go home. The psychological toll of the war had changed them, and a return to normal life was a terrifying prospect. The money is a powerful motivator. You think of your family, of your wife, of your children. You think of the things you can buy for them, the things you can give them. The bounty is a promise, a tangible reward for all the suffering you've endured. It's a way to justify all the pain, all the misery. It's a way to convince yourself that this was all for something. It was all for a purpose. But deep down you know that it's just a lie, a grim fantasy. The money is just a way to put a price on your soul, a way to sell your future for a few brief moments of comfort. The camaraderie is another powerful draw. You've been through hell with these men. You've shared your meagre rations. You've shared your fears. You've shared a grim, unspoken bond. They are your family now, your brothers. The thought of leaving them, of going back to a world where no one understands what you've been through, is a terrifying one. You're a part of a grim fraternity, a brotherhood of misery, and the thought of leaving it is a betrayal. A quirky tidbit. The re-enlistment papers were often signed with a ceremonial flourish, a bugle call, a rousing speech. It was a grim, theatrical performance, a way to make the men feel like they were a part of something grand and glorious. It was a way to disguise the grim reality of what they were doing, a way to make them feel like heroes, not just pawns in a grim game of chess. The act of re-enlisting is a grim, terrible paradox. You're choosing to go back to the hell you've just survived. You're choosing to go back to the hunger, the filth, the fear. You're choosing to go back to a life of misery, a life of constant gnawing dread. But you're also choosing to go back to a life of purpose, a life of belonging, a life where you're a part of a larger, terrible machine. It's a choice between two kinds of hell, the quiet, lonely hell of a normal life, or the loud, terrifying hell of the battlefield. And for some grim, terrible reason, you choose the latter. Historians still argue whether the high re-enlistment rates were a sign of the men's dedication to the cause, or a grim testament to the psychological damage they had sustained. Was it a triumph of patriotism, or a symptom of a profound, unshakable trauma? You don't have the answer. You only have the memory of the long, silent line of men, the sound of the sergeant's voice, and the grim, terrible choice you made. You are a man who has chosen to go back to hell, a man who has chosen to sell his soul for a few brief moments of comfort, a man who has chosen to be a ghost in a land of ghosts. And the end is still a long way off. You've made your choice. The bugle sounds, and you fall into line. You are a soldier again. You are a ghost, a man whose soul has been hollowed out, a man who has seen too much and felt too little. You are a part of a grim, terrible machine, and you will continue to march, to fight, to endure, to wait. You are a part of the hell you've just survived, and you know, with a profound and terrible certainty, that the end will not be a glorious thing. It will be a silent, meaningless end, a small, insignificant piece of a larger, incomprehensible tragedy. And you will have chosen it. You've survived it. The war is over. The bugles sound a final, melancholy note, and the men around you are cheering, crying, hugging each other. You feel a profound and terrible sense of emptiness. You should be happy. You should be relieved. But all you feel is a cold, hollow space in your soul. The war is over, but the aftermath, the long, slow, grinding hell of it, is just beginning. You are a veteran, a hero, a man who has endured the unendurable. But you are also a ghost, a man whose soul has been hollowed out, a man who will never be the same. You get a final handshake from your commanding officer, a bit of paper that says you've served honourably, and you are sent home. The journey home is a long, silent one. You're surrounded by other men, but you're a million miles away. You can't talk to them. You can't talk about the things you've seen, the things you've felt. You've become a stranger to yourself, and you're a stranger to the world. You arrive at your home, a place that feels both familiar and foreign. Your family is there. They hug you, they cry, they tell you how proud they are. You try to hug them back, but you feel nothing. You are a ghost, a man who is living, but who is not alive. The physical scars are a constant reminder of the hell you've been through. You have a limp, a constant dull ache in your leg where a minier ball ripped through your muscle. The doctors told you you were lucky you didn't lose the leg, but it feels like you did. The pain is a constant companion, a physical manifestation of the war's psychological toll. You feel a phantom ache in the places where the straps of your pack used to dig into your shoulders. You can feel the ghost of a splinter, the memory of a blister, the lingering phantom itch of the lice you had for months. Your body is a map of the war, a physical record of every minute of every day you spent in that living hell. But the psychological scars are the worst. You can't sleep. When you do, you have nightmares. You're back in the trenches, back in the mud, back in the smoke and the noise and the fear. You wake up in a cold sweat, your heart pounding in your chest, your hand on an imaginary rifle. The sounds of a normal life, a slamming door, a car backfiring make you jump. You're a coiled spring, a man who's always waiting for the next attack. The war is over, but it's not over for you. It's a constant silent presence in your life, a grim, unwelcome guest who has taken up residence in your soul. A historical fact. What we now call post-traumatic stress disorder was a common affliction among Civil War veterans. They called it soldier's heart, a term that described the physical and psychological toll of prolonged stress and fear. The men who had it were often a grim, silent presence. Men who were living but who were not alive. They couldn't talk about it, and they couldn't escape it. It was a constant, crippling affliction that followed them for the rest of their lives. You try to go back to a normal life. You try to work the farm, to go to church, to talk to your neighbours, but you can't. You can't talk to them about the things you've seen, the things you've felt. They don't understand. They talk about the war like it was a grand, glorious adventure, and you just nod, a silent, grim observer of your own life. You're a man who has been to hell and back, and they are a people who have only read about it in the newspapers. The distance between you is a vast, unbridgeable chasm. A quirky tidbit. Many veterans of the Civil War found it impossible to return to their normal lives. Some took to the road, becoming drifters, men who were constantly on the move, unable to settle down. Others found solace in drinking, a way to numb the pain, a way to forget for a brief moment the things they had seen. It was a grim, tragic aftermath to a grim, tragic war, a testament to the fact that the war had taken more than their bodies. It had taken their souls. Historians still argue about the legacy of the war on the men who fought it. Did it make them stronger, more resilient? Or did it break them, leaving them with a profound, unshakable trauma? You don't have the answer. You only have the memory of the long, silent journey home, the quiet, unspoken pain in your soul, and the grim, terrible knowledge that you will never be the same. The war has taken your youth, your innocence, and your future, and all you have left is a grim, weary resignation, a profound and terrible emptiness. The aftermath of war is your hell, and it's a hell that you will never escape. You're sitting on your porch watching the sun set. A fiery, beautiful end to a long, empty day. The skies are bruised purple and orange. You feel a profound and terrible sense of loss, a gnawing sadness that you will never get back the man you were before. The memory of your life before is a distant, fuzzy dream. The only thing that is real is the pain, the emptiness, and the constant gnawing dread. The war is over, but it will never be over for you. It will be a part of you forever, a permanent scar, a grim and terrible reminder of the living hell you endured. Now, as the screen fades to black and the words settle, you can begin to feel the warmth of your own blanket. The sounds of the day have faded. The fan hums a soft, continuous melody. You are home. You are safe. The grim, historical journey is done, and the memories of this particular living hell can begin to soften at the edges. Let the distant echoes of the bugles and the shouts of the sergeants fade into a gentle lullaby. The soldiers of the past fought their battles, and now you can let your mind find its own peace. Let the silence of the night fall around you. The past is where it belongs, and the present is where you are. Sleep now,